The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 51 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 3rd of August, 2020, under Hawaii's mandated limited airline crew isolation from the mobile Aviator Sound Studios on the 14th floor of the Prince Waikiki Hotel on the island of Oahu, where the only guests are the two legacy airline crews staying here. Yes, it's like a scene from The Shining. The pool has been drained, the amenities are few, and they have removed the coffee makers from the hotel rooms. Let me say that again, folks. They have removed the coffee makers from the hotel rooms. Oh my God, what was I thinking? Let's start off the show today by saying thank you to Captain Kevin Elmore for sitting down with me while on the Bradley, Hartford, Springfield, Windsor Locks layover as we recorded episode 50 of Squawk Ident, Captain, Commander, and Team USA. If you have not taken the time to visit the website to check out the guest book page, I highly encourage you to do so. There you will find some very cool images from Captain Elmore's amazing journey in aviation. I also want to extend a very special thank you to Captain Elmore's father, Mr. Cresswell Elmore. He reached out to me to share some kind words about the show and to share with me that aviation has been essential in his family's legacy. I discovered that Captain Elmore's grandfather was also an aviator, and his second cousin, a chief warrant officer for James Delaney. He was the first black helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army. With a little research on my own, I discovered that the late Chief Warrant Officer Delaney joined the U.S. Army in 1944. After completing the Warrant Officer Aviation course, he became a single and dual rotor helicopter pilot as well as a fixed-wing pilot. During the Vietnam War, he evacuated the wounded, transported men and equipment, and laid communication lines along treetops. He was even shot down once during a mission. He managed to escape and evade until he was picked up unharmed by friendly forces. Thank you again to Mr. Elmore for sharing that with me. Aviation truly does run in the bloodlines of the Elmore family. To help me kick off Flight 51 of Squawk Ident, joining me here in the mobile studios is the captain that I just flew out to Honolulu with just last night. Captain Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for agreeing to be here and checking out. My captain was talking about the podcast. He was interested in the technical side here and all the wires that we're stepping on over here on our feet to get this whole production going. And for those listeners that are curious about what I bring with me on layovers in order to produce this podcast, it's quite extensive, but it all fits in a small lunch type bag that most pilots carry on as a third bag. Usually they keep lunches in there, and I happen to keep recording equipment. I have my Zoom recorder, I have my MacBook Pro, and my EFB tablet, a couple microphones, and a crap load of cables and adapters. It all seems to fit pretty well in the bag, and here we are. Through the power of the internet and a good Wi-Fi connection, thanks to the Prince Waikiki Hotel's Wi-Fi, we're able to produce this show. So again, thanks, Chris, for hanging out with me today. Also joining us today is an exceptional aviator. He is a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, a Falcon 7X commander, a captain and corporate operator as well. He joins us from his spectacular chateau in San Diego, California. I keep saying that wrong. It's San Diego. Where he's enduring isolation in a house full of stir-crazy children and nowhere to escape to, except this podcast. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how the hell are you?
I'm doing all right, hanging in there. I'm happy to say that I'm feeling somewhat well rested, as my full chateau, as you call it, it's actually been empty the past week. And however, the fun is about to end as they're actually on their way back right now. My children will be rejoining me for some more educational opportunities, as I like to call them.
Yes, school will be in session in a few hours.
Absolutely.
So let's take this opportunity and make the most of it. Glad to have you. It's been since, episode 49 where you joined us, where we spoke to our Viking friends over there in Iceland. There's been some news that has reached the U.S. soil over the past few weeks about their current situation. Their flight attendants at the airline that they are operating at were having some pretty heavy contract negotiations with their company. And in the fact that the whole world is dealing with a pandemic of COVID proportions, the company decided to fire or let go 100% of their flight attendants. In a temporary fix, since they're only flying extremely limited flying into Europe from Iceland, nothing coming over to the U.S. at this point, they've decided to furlough pilots as well, and the furloughed pilots now have been called and offered the opportunity to go back to the training center to get what they're going to be called cabin safety officers. Now, cabin safety officers is a new term that they just made up. And they're going to train these pilots to operate the cabin equipment, to evacuate the aircraft, to go through all the mandatory training minus the serving of the food and beverage. And they're not asked, they're being told that, hey, you come back as a cabin safety officer, it's a temporary gig, at least you'll have a paycheck and benefits until we recall you from the furlough for being a pilot. And that's their solution. Now, whether or not this is actually going to come to fruition is going to be kind of a curious thing. I know a lot of pilots here in the U.S. have been discussing this very fact that this was going to happen. And, we're all looking at this closely because this is not good. This is not what, we signed up for. I don't think this would ever fly in the U.S. With the strength of our associations, or AKA pilots unions. So it's going to be very interesting to see. We're going to be doing our best to reach out to our Viking friends to find out what actually is going to transpire in this current situation with their current employer. And we'll keep you updated as we get the information. We'll pass it along to you. So that's the last time we were all together. And then last time, the flying around, and I had the opportunity to interview Captain Elmore, as we mentioned, and that was a very interesting conversation. Learned a lot, and I hope you enjoyed that show. But today, we're going to kind of catch up what we're doing. We're expecting Rob to join us here. Rob D's currently running around Texas, running some errands. As soon as he gets back to the house, he's going to join in on the conversation, and we'll go from there. But today we were going to talk a little bit about warn letters. And what are warn letters? And we're going to get to that a little later in the show. But for now, Roger, I just wanted to catch up with you. What have you been doing in the past few weeks?
Sure. Well, I haven't been doing a whole lot of flying lately. However, given the opportunity, since I've been staying on the ground, I had the opportunity to get back into the classroom, going back to my previous job or opportunity that I had teaching some King Air recurrent classes. And so I taught actually a couple of recurrent classes the past the past 2 weeks or so. And it's always interesting to go back into the classroom and kind of sit on the other end when you're not in the hot seat, if you will, and actually be the guy that runs everything, where everything looks like it's easy. and then kind of being the guy that gets to critique everything, looking for those things to call you out on, I guess, if you will. And so that's actually, other than that, I haven't had to do a whole lot. It's, a little bit of the upside of the corporate thing. And, right now where there's not a whole lot going on. And so we find other ways to occupy our time. But that's what I've been doing on the flying front primarily.
Yeah. And you were telling me that you were doing, pretty standard training and dealing with, your typical turbine procedures like V1 cuts. And you had an interesting thing to say about that. How are your students doing with that?
Sure. So, basically the way that I run the training is I'm not there to fool people. That's one of my canned speech, if you will, on day one. Both of the recurrent classes rather are 2 days, and both the classes that I did were 2-day classes. And I tell them at the beginning, when we get into the sim, I'm not trying to fool you. I'm not trying to trick you. Just go and fly the plane, and we're just looking for procedures. And the number one thing far and away in terms of students coming through isn't the aircraft, but it's instrument procedures and your basic stuff. When you start out flying instruments, or you start out flying complex airplanes. And in this case, I had 3 students over the course of these 2 different classes, and all 3 of them made the same mistake. Technically we don't call them V1 cuts in the King Air, but it's the principle remains the same, which is basically as you're rolling down the runway, and right as you lift off and get to your rotation point, which is about 100 knots in the King Air, we rotate, and then I'll kill the engine on you. And all 3 students on the first one failed to pull the gear up. Positive rate, gear up. We do it every single day. And all 3 of them failed to do that. 2 of them eventually did figure it out on their own. The third one, actually, I let him fly around for probably about 30 seconds. 30 seconds is usually about my limit. That's when I'll go ahead and pause the sim, and that's when the students will start looking around, because at that point they know, hey, something's wrong, because otherwise, why is the simulator just stopped? And at that point, they figure out, hey, something's wrong, and then I'd wait for them to figure it out, wait for those 3 green lights there staring at them. But I thought it was an interesting thing that all 3 of them did not get the gear up. In this case, 2 of the 3 actually were professional pilots. The third one is actually an owner pilot, because we do, some people fly their own airplanes. Those are the owner pilots, and it is a bit of a sliding scale. But even the 2 professional pilots failed to pull the gear up. A lot of times when you go in the simulator, you know exactly when that's going to occur. And I do take great pains, or go to lengths to try and disguise the fact that that's what's going to happen next. And even after the debrief, the third guy who I just had a few days ago actually flat out said it. Well, I didn't know you were going to do it on the first one. And I looked at him and I go, that's exactly the point. If you actually experience an engine failure on departure, let's face it, as pilots, and we all say that we're good pilots, and we all say that we're going to think about if we have an engine failure on departure, and it becomes kind of a canned thing, especially where you guys are flying in a multi-crew environment. Well, if we experience an engine failure, a V1 cut, well, we're going to bring the gear up, and then we're going to accelerate, and then at V2 or whatever, your guys' number is V2 plus 15. We're going to pull the flaps up. We're going to go fly out. Okay, that's great. Except then all of a sudden, when we get in there, things go haywire. And I see it in that training environment all the time. Now, granted, in a 121 environment, it is definitely different. We're flying just a FAR 23 airplane. You're not required to go through the regimented training that the 121 environment does, but it's still unfortunate, and there's still too many accidents that occur, and even in the King Air world especially, where there's been a number over the past several years, and a couple of them, the gear's hanging down. And in these turboprops, it's not a turbofan engine where you can still climb out on one engine at 1,500 to 2,000 feet a minute. If you're doing 300 to 400 feet a minute, you're doing good. And then you leave that gear down, and you're up at a higher elevation or a higher, temperature departure, and bad things can happen. And I want the students to kind of have that as part of their takeaway, that look, I try and simplify it for them. Step 1, fly the airplane. Step 2, get the gear up. Step 3, we got to prop. We got to make sure that it has feathered, and then go back to flying the airplane. And that's really all we're trying to do. And I try so hard to simplify that for them in the classroom, and yet for whatever reason, too many times we skip that simple step that we do on every single departure. So anyway, coming back into the classroom, that was my biggest takeaway from that, was that all 3 of them failed to get the gear up after popping an engine. And it's one of those things that I think is a good takeaway for all of us to try and keep it simple and remember the basics.
Yeah, we run through that in the airline operation as well. We do the pre-departure briefing, and the pilot flying usually does the brief at our carrier at Legacy Airlines. The captain can either do the pre-flight departure briefing, or they can kind of give you 1 or 2 things and then hand it over to the first officer if it's the first officer's leg, and then they'll give the departure briefing. And it's the same thing, like you're saying. We go through this kind of mundane, it's the same thing over and over again. There's a script that we can read from if we want to. In the event of an engine failure, anything before 80 knots, we'll abort. After 80 knots, if the airplane talks to us, or engine fire failure, or if the airplane won't fly, or we get any of these other oral units, we're going to abort up to V1. After V1, we'll handle the situation airborne. Okay, so we go through these briefings, and after a while, they get so, after years of saying the same thing, you don't even think about it. You're spitting out like music lyrics.
They're just words.
They're just words. And then all of a sudden, you have the human factor of, in real life, you're taking off, and all of a sudden, bam. And now you're like, oh, what's it doing? Is this really happening? Have you had an experience like that?
Step 1, denial. It's not happening. You don't believe it.
Yeah.
And then step 2, eventually you go, acceptance. All right, okay, this did happen. And time's going. Yeah.
The clock is ticking, and how you react is really dependent on how your training and your complacency level, and so this is it.
It is a real thing, and I have actually, in the 120 world or 121 world, I had an experience with a Czech airman out of Chicago O'Hare where that happened. We could not have been more than 30 knots on departure roll, and we got a cabin emergency. This was in the 145, which, Tony, I know you're familiar with. And we're rolling down. I'm in the right seat, flying with a Czech airman and chief pilot, a base chief pilot, and we are 30 or 40 knots. And ding, 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 the cabin emergency light goes on, and he did nothing. It was his leg. He literally did nothing. And he kind of looked at me. And I said, well, are you going to stop? This is with a Czech airman out of Chicago O'Hare. And by that time, we were probably about 60 knots. So it wasn't, we still were not in the high-speed regime. We got nice long runways out there at O'Hare, and it was a non-event. But it does happen. It becomes so canned. They're just words. Anything below 80 knots, we're going to abort for anything.
Yeah.
Czech airman, chief pilot, and here we are. And he
needed
me to tell him, hey, are you going to stop? And as it turned out, the end story is kind of funny, is that Air Force One was actually on the ramp off to the left side, and the flight attendant had grabbed the phone to tell the passengers that if they wanted to look at Air Force One, we were passing it, and she hit the wrong button as she reached out behind her. And so there was that was all that it was. But again, it's that takeaway that, we up on the flight deck, we have no idea what's going on. And for whatever reason, we just kept going. Like, are you going to stop?
Yeah. Did you eventually abort, or did he keep on?
At about 60 knots, we were going to abort. But even in the time that it took for him to register it, that, we've got a cabin emergency, ding, ding, ding going off. Well, why was that not just, why are you not?
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you. Did you hear any of that, what was going on over here?
No.
We just had a tsunami siren go off for at least.
Did you really?
Yeah, 30 seconds. I don't know if you could pick that, if you heard it on the microphone, picked it up, but I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
That makes sense.
No, quite all right.
Yeah.
Because I was in the shower, and I heard the door on the shower, the glass door, boom, and I was like, did the maid come in the room? Is somebody banging on the door? So I was hearing the door kind of rattle, so we must have had a little shake.
Maybe we had a little earthquake.
Yeah, a little earthquake.
Or the volcanoes erupting.
Yeah.
Hey,
check out. Look at the big island.
We're reporting live.
Yeah. Your flight's leaving early.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't hearing things. Okay,
I guess. Yeah. There's nobody at this hotel, so I mean, you could hear the freaking crickets in the hallway. You know?
I think it's funny that there's nobody in this hotel, and the only two people at the hotel are sitting 2 feet from each other.
Well, this is pretty much what we are in the cockpit too. So
I know, but you're the only 2 people in the hotel, and you're right there.
There's 2 more that look just like us that are going to fly us back tonight while we sleep in the back.
You're right.
Yeah, while we ride home, plus the flight attendants. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I were before the show started, Roger and I were kind of catching up, and I was explaining to him how. So this is a wonderful trip. This is the first time I've been back at the island. We're going to kind of get into that here in a moment. Since March, and I was excited, but then my schedule changed about a week ago, and instead of flying out, having about a 19-hour layover, and then flying back this afternoon, landing at LAX in the evening, my schedule, that return flight canceled. I figured they were going to scrap the whole thing, and I was going to, basically lose the entire trip. But no, they moved my return leg to a deadhead on the red eye going back to LA. So Chris and I are going to be deadheading tonight luckily in first class back to Los Angeles, where we can get about a 4 or 5 hour nap if we so choose. And we noticed that there were some deadheading crew members flying out to Honolulu with us, captain and first officer, and I knew the captain. I'm like, what are you doing? You're deadheading out with us? What time do you go back? He goes, we do the red eye back. So we're flying you out, and you're flying us back. Hey?
I'm all for it.
At least one of you stay in landing current.
Yeah, he gave it to me because he felt sorry for me.
He needs the practice.
No, I mean, he's the one that got the warning letter. I'm not gonna be put on the street, possibly. So
yeah,
I said you can have
it, and it was a good landing. It was
very good.
Yeah. Every once in a while, even a blind squirrel gets
a blind squirrel.
Thank you. Yeah. So you were talking about, and I apologize for interrupting you. You were talking about your students and going through these kind of the motions and how we kind of get complacent over time when we. And you just you have a human factor. It's that whole shock, that initial reaction to, oh shit, is this really happening? And that's a normal human behavior. And what our training really is all about is reacting in a manner which we minimize that shock factor and go into our automatic recovery technique, memory items, memory profiles. And you weren't seeing that from people. Now, were these new people on the aircraft? Because you're not giving type ratings, you're giving training.
Correct. And these were recurrents. This was not initial courses. These were people, all of them. The newest one, this was their 3rd time through training. That was the most recent. But it goes back to what Captain Chris had just said. It's denial, and we all do it.
Yeah.
Is this really happening? But like you said, there's an element of time that comes with that, and fortunately, most of the time, I don't think that that 1 or 2 seconds. Most of the time is not going to be the factor between life and death. But sometimes, unfortunately, it is, and just from that training environment, and I'm sure that you guys have seen it too, obviously for the amount of time that you've been around, it is real. It is something that we always need to be aware of, even though, if we're all being honest with each other, we're all guilty of it also.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, we were kind of talking about this, and lately, anybody that's on social media knows that there has been a video that recently got posted of a Cessna 172 doing some training. Now, you have the luxury of being in a simulator. And in the simulator, it's a safe environment. You're not going to go home with a bloody nose or a broken arm, if not worse, if you muck up your training. But not everyone has the ability to use a simulator, especially in general aviation, and especially when you're dealing with a Cessna 172. So this video came up, and I saw this, and I just have to share it with you. So I'm going to share screen here, and let's take a look at how it could go terribly wrong. So we're looking at a 172 on approach, He's saying, oh, those guys aren't professional like us. A touchdown. Oh, nice landing. Flaps up. Okay, gear up. Oh, no. And so the student puts the gear up instead of flaps up. Okay, so anyone, and I'll post this on YouTube later, but so what's the lesson here? And for those of you listening on the podcast, you don't have the video, let me give you a rundown of what we just saw. So it's like a GoPro camera sitting in the middle on the rear bulkhead of the cockpit there in the 172, and it's capturing really over the shoulder of both pilots, and you can see they're on short final. Now, number one rule, right? Sterile cockpit. Now, you're in a training environment, so the only thing you can talk about is what is pertinent to the flight or the training. The instructor mentioning on the short final, those guys aren't professional pilots like we are. Okay, that's not really pertinent to training. That's okay, I got you there. That's not a big deal. So they touch down. They're doing a touch and go procedure. And this is a retractable gear aircraft, whatever it is. And they touch down. And as soon as you touch down, now you have to take off again. So you have to get configured for takeoff configuration. Now, that particular aircraft, I don't know, he said, I don't know the legitimacy of this video, but it is, we're using it as a lesson, a learning lesson here. And he says, flaps up. And the student says, okay, gear up. And he puts the gear up. Now, what happens is the left main landing gear comes up. Collapses the aircraft. This tricycle gear aircraft now is leaning to the left side and scraping the left wingtip. And he says, what the hell are you doing? A couple expletives go out there, and the FO or the student pilot looks over and says, well, you said gear up. And he says, I said flaps up, you idiot. So this is how things can go very wrong here really fast. And it's just a matter of being diligent and really listening up and not Jackie Channing the controls. So yeah, it shit happens, but that was a very costly one. As you can see, another person has joined us here on the podcast. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a pickleball master, and a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his fortress of isolation, where he has a garage stocked full of toilet paper, hand sanitizer, N95 mask, and quite a few RC aircraft, I must say. From somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, help us in welcoming back to the show, Rob D. Rob, what the hell is going on with you?
What's up, fellas? Good to be back. It's been a couple of weeks, and sorry I missed you guys a couple shows ago, but it's good to be back, ready to get back with all the subjects that we've been talking about.
Well, you've been busy. You've been commanding your vessel out on the lake with the girls and sending me pictures as if you're trying to make me jealous. And let me tell you, it's working. It's working.
We are definitely maximizing our time that we have available with the kids and the boat, and we're getting a lot of use out of it. I think I put 2 months that I've had the boat, I think I put over 50, maybe 60 hours on the boat. Quite a few tanks of gas.
Yeah.
So
gas is cheap.
Yeah, we're having it is. It's nice. So we're just having a good time out there. We were thinking about going out today, but just kind of pressed for time on some things. So, but here I am.
Yeah. So last time we had you on the show was episode 47, when the three of us were together. Airline Apocalypse. That was a good show, where we kind of talked about everything that was kind of starting to happen and unravel, especially with the stimulus package that the airlines received and how their expiration date is going to be October 1st. And we were talking about the current information that we had at the time, and now here we are today, and it's really not looking any better. Now, the revised seniority list came out just a few days ago, and I took a look, and right now at Legacy Airlines, with a little over 2 years of seniority, I'm at about 1,980 and change from the bottom of the pilot list. How about yourself, Rob? Did you take a look yet?
Yeah, I looked. I'm about 2,200 numbers. 2,200 guys junior to me. So I am definitely in the bullseye of that furlough list. So I'm gotta be honest with you, man. My cage is a little rattled. I'm a little nervous, but I'm remain optimistic that we're the company's gonna be able to figure something out, and hopefully we have a vaccine soon. I think that'll be part of the solution. But yeah, I'm there. I'm right there with you.
Did you get your warn letter?
We got a email from the company's union, so we don't get letters here in Texas. I think there's only like California, New York, and a couple other states. They actually have to physically mail a letter. We can be notified through our unions, and we got that the other day with an email.
Yeah. Well, it's rattled my cage as well. I know we've been talking about this, and I think the tone of our show is very much positive, and we're doing our best to keep calm and carry on, as one of the show titles from the past, and don't panic and all these things. And I maintain true to that philosophy. Here at Legacy Airlines, we are, I think, in better shape than most. We were going to talk a little bit about that today, about what a warn letter is, and then kind of move on with a little bit more positive news after that. But let's dive into it, because a lot of people have been seeing these posts, especially on social media, about warn letters and furloughs and things like that. So what is a warn letter? It's the Worker Adjustment and Retaining Notification Act of 1988. Okay. So it is a U.S. labor law which protects employees, their families, and communities by requiring that most employers with 100 employees or more to provide a 60-day calendar day advance notification of plant closings or mass layoffs as defined by the Act. So a warn letter is not a warning letter. It is a Worker Adjustment and Retaining Notification Act. It's there to let you know that, hey, you might want to look for a job somewhere else, because you might get furloughed or laid off soon. And so it's a heads up. Now, the heads up letter doesn't mean that you're going to get furloughed. And for some carriers, that is a very true thing. It's that they have to go with an initial assessment. I know we've read over the past few weeks that United sent out warn letters to a number of their pilots, and their initial calculation was inaccurate. And unfortunately, an additional, was it 1,800 pilots, did you read, Rob, that got an additional warn letter? So now it's up to over a third of their entire pilot group is looking at.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but that sounds pretty close to the accurate number. It's a lot more than they projected.
Yeah, which is the worst case scenario. I mean, you want them to send out, let's say 2,500, and then only furlough potentially 500, and only for a short period of time, which would be ideal. Zero furloughs would be the best, obviously. And furloughs are tough. Most aviators that have been around and in the industry for a while,
I got a question. So what are your feelings on that United news? You think that's just a posturing thing for the payroll protection program that's being debated in the government right now? Do you think that they inflated their numbers just to possibly create more of an urgency in the government to pass the payroll protection program?
I don't know. I mean, I think if they would have had a huge number at the beginning and then not use any of them, I would say that would be a true statement. I don't know if having an initial number and then saying, well, the industry hasn't bounced back like we thought it would, so we're going to add almost 2,000 more people to that list of furloughs. It could. I mean, I think there's a strategy at all of it. But let's look at those numbers. Through some little bit of research, and don't quote me on the exact numbers because these numbers tend to be changing almost hourly. But warn notices have gone out to over 12,500 pilots across the U.S. and they've been issued to signal the potential furloughs. United, the total number that they sent out of warn letters, 3,900. Delta sent out 2,500. American sent out 2,500. Piedmont sent out 130 to the regional. Allegiant 275, Spirit 800, Frontier 500, Republic 933 pilots, 400 downgrades, and they're closing the Houston base and their Kansas City base. PSA has sent out warn letters to 730 pilots with an announcement that they're closing Knoxville and Norfolk as bases. Hawaiian said they're going to send out approximately 175 warn letters. Envoy, the subsidiary to American, sent out 350 warn letters. GoJet, all pilots were sent warn letters. Air Wisconsin sent out 350 pilots. Now, unless you know the total number of pilots, you don't really get the full scope of what's going on. One website that most aviators, especially when they're trying to get a job and make an idea of which carrier is probably the best to go apply to, go to Airline. What is it? Airlinepilots.net.
I think it's airline apps.
Airlinepilotcentral.com.
That's what it is. Airlinepilotcentral.com. So if you Google it and check it out, and they give you up-to-date. People update that all the time. They give you up-to-date numbers on pay, on total pilots, on aircraft in the fleet. So then you can do kind of a percentage breakdown and see really how bad these warn letters are going to be affecting. But it gets worse. We've had news over the past few weeks of closures of entire airlines. United just announced a deal. It's been all over the news here the past couple of days that they had 2 regional jet contracts and they've decided to go with only one. And so ExpressJet is out. Well, that was the last flying ExpressJet had. They've lost all their other flying, so they're going to be closing their doors completely by the year 2021. Trans-States Airline has already ceased operations permanently. They did that on April 1st, and Compass Airlines ceased operations permanently on April 5th. Another airline over in Alaska, Raven Alaska, filed for bankruptcy and laid off all of its employees on the 5th. So this is pretty major event. And yes, Congress needs to pay attention to this because we're only talking about pilots here. We haven't even scratched the surface with all the other labor groups that are in the industry, from gate agents to mechanics to flight attendants. I mean, over at American, I heard that their flight attendant group, they're going back over 10 years in seniority and furloughing 10 years worth of flight attendants. That's crazy. You've been with a company a decade. You think you're pretty much safe unless something major happens. Well, guess what? Something major has happened. So hopefully October 1st, we'll get better numbers, more facts about what actually is going to happen, how many people are actually going to get furloughed. Normally, you want the company to be very conservative and send out as many furlough notices as they think worst case scenario would happen, and then in the reality, bring that back to the minimal furloughs as possible, because furloughs cost money as well. So let's see what happens. It could be, like you said, Rob, a chess move, some posturing to try to get another stimulus package approved. Let's just hope for the best here and see how it all turns out. I know, Chris, you've got a pretty long career in aviation. And luckily, you've not had to be furloughed here. Your timing has been impeccable. But is there any insight you can give to us, generation that been only doing this for maybe a decade or two and are now dealing with furlough maybe for the first time?
Good luck and timing. You don't control it. It's who's the best airline? The one that hires you first, and you're there, and you're stuck with it. So if they do well, you do well. If things go bad and you were the last one in the door, you're the first one shown the door. And I was fortunate, came in right at the front of a hiring wave, and a lot of people behind me, and then 9/11 happened. Yeah, I went backwards, but I was retained. I wasn't worried about it. But I got kind of low, and yeah, the company was going to come back for another bite of the apple. Say we're going to need another 1,000 pilots, another 1,500 or something, and I was going to end up near the bottom. I probably would have talked to one of my buddies and said, "Hey, I'm going to take the stand instead, and I'll go work for a company as an engineer. I'll go do business development for one of the defense contractors or something till it all blows over." Yeah.
Yeah, and it really is kind of a, like Rob mentioned, I mean, it rattles the cage. For most of us, it's our livelihood, especially if we're a single income earner like myself. What am I going to do? Welcome to Walmart.
Yeah, I was wondering if when you were about to flow over from Sandpiper, if you had the same thought that I did, as hey, we're pretty senior over there. Obviously we weren't the most senior pilots, but when you made your way over to Legacy, if that even crossed your mind about being furloughed because we're at the bottom of the list, if anything happened, for me, when I was getting ready to flow over from Sandpiper, I got to tell you, I was like, man, now we're at the bottom of a list, and we're really exposed to furlough if anything happened. And next thing you know, here we are.
Yeah.
3 years later, I was like, I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think of furlough, and starting out in this career, it was a different time, and a lot of the senior captains that I flew with would say, in a career, you can expect to be furloughed a minimum of once and an average of twice, and in a bad career, bad choices, bad timing, 3 or 4 times. But you're always going to have a minimum of once. And anybody that hasn't been furloughed is either lucky or lying. And I actually thought that times have changed and that wasn't going to happen. And we've talked about it ad nauseum in the early episodes of Squawk Ident, where this is a different time. There was a pilot shortage. We were, this career field was a field where we would tell our friends and the children of our friends and family, don't do it, don't become a pilot. And then now all of a sudden we were changing our tune and we were saying, absolutely, it's a great career to get into. Tell them to start studying now, because by the time all these retirements happen in the next 10 years, all these thousands of pilots, mandatory retirement at age 65, there's going to be a huge shortage, and you're going to upgrade, you're going to be senior, and you're going to have a wonderful career, and you're going to make good money. When I came over from Sandpiper, I honestly thought, well, now I'm on probation, and I've got to really do my best to shine and put my best foot forward, and as I do on every flight, operate as if it's my last. I honestly have always felt like this is an absolute privilege, and I'm going to do everything to protect that. So I operate, and I pretty straight and narrow style of flying. I never thought that furlough was going to be an issue. I thought, hey, I'm at the tip of the pyramid. I finally made it. I'm freaking Rocky Balboa on the steps of the art museum in Philadelphia. I could hear the music playing every time I thought about it. And the only thing I thought that would be a detriment is if something were to have happened while I was on probation. And I passed probation, and I thought, that's it. As long as I show up to work, I don't do something stupid, I don't bang up an airplane, I'm good. I'm set to retire. All I got to do is keep my medical. So I stay healthy, I stay fit, I go run. Chris and I just got back from an 8.5 mile run walk around Diamond Head. I mean, this is the life.
Run, walk, jog. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Survive.
Impressed.
Yeah.
Nice. Somebody chasing you? What's going on?
Well, there are cops everywhere.
Voluntary. Yeah.
Well, we're under this, and we'll talk about here in a second, this Hawaii quarantine or crew quarantine, which is a little different. But yeah, I never thought, to answer your question, that furlough was on the table. And then when COVID started, or at the time, coronavirus, this career path, I still remain confident in the fact that it's a good one. I still think that this is, initially we were talking on the show about this being a bump in the road. We were giving estimates of, hey, 90 days and then 6 months, and then that turned into give it a year. Now I don't know. Now I don't know because really there's too many outside factors. We have these inflated numbers from the M5 media, the 5 mass media's outlets that all have interests in corporates, lobbyists, and in the Chinese Communist Party playing a role in what media is being released and disseminated. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm a realist, and I do try to maintain that critical idea that we have to be smart about things and ask the questions of why things are happening, and not just take the Max Headroom's word for it. And Chris and I were talking about this ad nauseum on the flight over. We had 5.5 hours to kind of have these kinds of discussions coming over. And especially when you're with CPDLC, you're not talking to anybody or making regular position reports via voice. So we had plenty of time to have these debates. But we both kind of agreed that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of outside factors. There's a lot of outside political factors in this. And it really, until there's some viable either inoculation or vaccine or whatever it's going to be, this is going to continue for a while. So how long? We have no idea. These furlough notices have rattled our cages. If you know a pilot, by all means, give them a call, make sure they're doing okay, and tell them you're going to be okay. We've talked about programs out there. If you're at an air carrier and you're one of these pilots that received a WARN letter, there are always organizations associated with your union or with your company that are there for you. There's the Employee Assistance Program, EAP. I know Legacy has a few programs. One's called Flaps or Wings or something like that. I don't want to really get too specific about that, but there are programs out there. Your union rep can easily put you in communication with someone that'll just talk to you about what's going on. We need to stick together, all of us. So, Chris had a very small gesture. It's not a big deal on who flies. I get paid the same. He gets paid the same. But he's like, you got a WARN letter. You fly this out to Honolulu. Who knows the next time you're going to be able to do this? Be nice to your FOs or your pilots that, may not have a job. It's just extremely stressful. And it's the last thing we want to have to deal with your pilot.
In all honesty, I've been kind of, I've had a couple flights the last couple of weeks, and I'm flying it like I'm never gonna fly again. I'm having a good time. I'm haven't really been going anyplace fun, but just enjoying the time that I'm up there. And the other day we actually had a hold for a thunderstorm, and then we actually had a divert. And normally those situations you're just kind of like, like, it creates so much more work and makes your day so much longer. But I got to tell you, man, I was up there in the hold and kind of like holding over a Stanfield, going into Casa Grande on the ILS, there to what I forget what runway 3, you get in the stack in Stanfield. And you have guys 500 feet above you, guys 500 feet below you. So we're holding over Dillo intersection, which is about roughly 30 miles due west of Fort Hood, Killeen, Texas. And we're at like 30,000 feet. And there was Southwest above us. It was Delta below us. We were all going to Austin, and we're all just burning holes in the sky. We're all kind of like, as we hit the hold here, Southwest was right there and Delta was right there. And so anyways, I was just eating it up, man. I was like, man, I'm probably won't see this for a while again. And then when we diverted into Fort Hood, the captain was like, I've never been here before. I didn't even know this place even existed. And I'm like, I probably did this 5 or 6 times a day for about 10 years.
Yeah.
So I could tell you everything about this place, although there's not much to talk about. But so that was kind of fun, and getting to see some Sandpiper people again. And so anyway, yeah, I was just eating it up,
Yeah.
Like
So
I'd never
speaking
do it
of,
again.
we kind of dove into the warn letters because that's what I wanted to know if you got one or how that was going. So let's catch up with you. Let's get back on the SGN track here with some good news. So you've been flying, obviously. I saw that you did send me information there last week on your holding adventure. What other
Yep.
flying have you been doing?
I gotta look, man. I've been doing a lot of day trips, which is crazy. Either I screwed up or some senior guy screwed up and didn't bid these things. So I had a lot of day trips last month, and I've been doing flying to like San Francisco, um, LA turns, Vegas turns. I only had, let's see, 3 overnights last month: Albuquerque, Minneapolis, and Tampa. Everything else were day trips. So the weather's been good. Flying with some really good guys, some really senior guys. Um, uh, One guy was 300s, I guess, in the company. So he
Yeah.
was yeah, he was kind of fun just to, hey, how do you bid? Oh, if I just pick 2 or 3 things because I know what the first guy likes. So
Nice.
I'm like, that must be nice. Yeah. So yeah, doing a lot of day flying. I actually got 95 hours of flying last month because
Wow.
I need to make as much as I can. I
Yeah.
got a boat and some kids and volleyball, so I got to fly as much as I can. But I was kind of restricted the previous months because of the company um, doing the monthly max thing. So I was restricted to like 50 hours before that. And then, so anyways, I just tried to make up a little bit last month. But the trips have been good. Weather's been fairly good, except for that, one time we had a divert. And yeah, just really day trips. Go to work 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm done by like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
So when you diverted to the hood, did you take off right away and go make it to Austin, or did you end up spending the night?
It was, we did a fuel quick stop for fuel, and we were in the air within 35, 40 minutes. I mean, it worked out really well. We were the only plane there. So they were really happy to see a Legacy Airlines airplane there. They were saying they never have a Legacy divert into there. So they were, as we were making our way to the airport, I was talking to the station manager, and hey, we're 737. We have slides on our doors, so we'll have you guys open the door from the outside. We'll need stairs, trying to coordinate the whole thing so that as soon as we landed, there was a fuel truck there. They had the stairs ready. All we had to do was just pull the stairs up, do the walk around as they refueled the airplane, and got our new release, and we're turn and burn. It was kind of like a sandpiper quick turn at an outstation.
Yeah.
So it worked out pretty quick.
And let's talk about diversion, since you so eloquently brought up the procedure here. Diversions happen. The best story about diversions is always when you go into an outstation or basically a divert airport that you never really go into unless you have to divert. And when you told me, yeah, we diverted, and they were like, well, I'd never seen one of them Legacy 7.3s before.
That's how it was.
Wow.
They had three workers out there with cameras or taking pictures or like, hey, look who dropped in. And even the air traffic control tower, they were like, why are you guys coming here? You guys picking up troops? Because usually, it's Fort Hood, the Army base there. Are you guys picking up some troops that are deploying? We're like, no, we're actually weather diverting. We were on our way to Austin, and we need to stop in here to get gas. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, welcome. We never see you guys here. Well, here you are. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah. So when an airplane goes from point A to point B, for the listeners out there that may not be aviators themselves, you normally have enough fuel to get there, plus you need 45 minutes of reserve fuel, meaning I get there and I go to shoot an approach, and for whatever reason I have to do a go around, and now I've got 45 minutes to turn around and come back and try again a few times, maybe, possibly even. When you're not given an alternate airport, you always have what's called a contingency airport, and the dispatchers out there know exactly what I'm talking about. Even though there's not one listed on your flight release, a Part 121 carrier has to have a contingency airport. Now, that airport can be a military base. It just has to have certain criteria, and every airline has their own criteria. And I believe at one point, at least at Sandpiper, I know it was that the runway had to be a minimum of like 5,200 feet or something like that. And it had to be within so many miles of your destination. So there's a contingency, whereas if you get there, you didn't have an alternate filed, and all of a sudden somebody gears up on the one runway and they can't get that airplane off the runway anytime soon. And now you're like, well, now what? So you can contact dispatch, and then they would refile you to your contingency airport. And that 45 minutes of reserve is for these kind of scenarios. Now, you were dealing with thunderstorms, as we do in the summertime, especially in the central area of the country, as Texas is. And plus, you had a lot of weather coming up from the coast. I believe it was a hurricane. You remember the name of it?
Yeah, there was a hurricane that was, I think it already did its damage down there on the coast. I don't even remember the name of it because I didn't have to fly into it or around it or anything like that. But there was basically a cold front that came through North Texas, which cold front, dropped the temperature down to the low 90s instead of the high 90s.
There you go.
But that created a lot of thunderstorms, and so we were on our way from Dallas to Austin. Our alternate was San Antonio. So, south of Austin is San Antonio. So our alternate for Austin was on the other side of our destination, but it was also on the other side of the weather. So in other words, we had to go through the weather, not only to get to our destination, but also our alternate. So, that's kind of probably a poor choice of alternates, but the good thing about that is, you had a little extra fuel because, the alternate is further down the road. So while we were holding, the nearest airport was Gray Army Airfield or Fort Hood, Killeen, Texas. And so we just double checked our diversion guide, and that was one of the approved diversion airports for refueling and everything. And so the captain used that handy dandy little crew phone app, called the dispatcher, and checked in with him and said, "Hey, can we change our alternate to Fort Hood? That'll give us an extra like 20 minutes of hold fuel, and then we can, if we had to, we could just drop right into Fort Hood." And that's essentially what we did. We were in the hold for probably 30 minutes, and we had easily another 20-30 minutes of hold fuel on board. But at the 30-minute mark, which is really close to our EFC time, ATC came back. And EFC, by the way, our listeners may not know, it is the expect further clearance time, meaning that if this time, if you get to the certain time that they give you, this is when you could either expect to leave the hold, or when they will give you a different time to expect to leave the hold. So we came up to our EFC time, and then they told us that the hold times are now indefinite. The airport doesn't know when they're going to be able to accept traffic. So at that time, it was pretty easy choice just to say, all right, instead of burning gas up here, let's go down, get some more gas. And hopefully by the time when we land, which was our plan, the weather would have moved through. Everybody else would have diverted in the air, and we would have been ready to go with gas in our tanks for the quick, I think it's probably a 10-15 minute flight from Fort Hood to Austin. So
we'll be right back with the show after a brief word from our sponsors. Yeah, and you said something earlier, and I believe Chris kind of picked up on it too. This first officer is a very talented young man, because he knew Fort Hood, and instead of being the type of FO that's just kind of along for the ride going, okay, I guess we're going there. I guess I'll need an approach plate and I'll get the ATIS. And he was communicating with their operations while en route, letting them know, hey, we're diverting to your airport. And this is an aircraft that I know for a fact that you don't normally get. We have things called slides. You're going to have to open the door from the outside to disarm the slide. And you're going to need stairs that can actually reach a 737. So that's, talk about being proactive. That's wonderful that you were attentive and able to do all this, to be proactive about it, so that when you got there, everything was smooth.
Yeah.
And
I mean, think about it, Tony. I mean, you were a check airman over at Sandpiper, and so was I. And we flew into these stations all the time, and the people there generally are really good at what they do, but they only have so many people. They only have the equipment that they need that's necessary to work the regional jets. And to be a provisional or a refueling airport, they do have to carry the equipment to refuel, let's say, a 737 or whatever, but that's equipment that they don't normally use all the time. So they have to hey, go find it in the storage facility, which is probably where they store the boat and the trailer and the RV,
the barbecue.
And for Texas, probably the de-icing machine and all that other stuff. And they have to procure that, get it ready, and it can be a fiasco with the limited manning that they have. So while we were just kind of hanging out there in the hold and we we're starting to talk about going to Fort Hood, I was like, we better give them a call and give them a heads up, because that's the last thing you want to do, is have to deal with that when you land and wait 20-30 minutes for them to find all that equipment and bring it out to you. So it worked out pretty good for us.
Yeah. Now, Chris, have you ever had a hold situation where you had to drop into a provisional airport like that, or?
No. Really? As a captain, no, I don't. Yeah, I haven't been in the captain seat that long. Oh. Now, back in the Navy, I did one time,
So how do you do that? You landed another aircraft carrier?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, you do that. You don't want to do that mistakenly, because they paint up your airplane pretty badly.
I was going to say, I seen the graffiti on the airplanes.
Yeah.
If you do land on the wrong carrier.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was flying and doing some test flying out in China Lake in F-18s, and it was late at night, and I get a call from the test range to let me know that the lights are out. That the tower says the lights are out. I'm like, okay, so the guys in the tower can't see. All right, that's not a big deal. Well, they don't relay to me that the tower is saying, no, the lights on the airfield are out. You can't land here. Aha. Yeah, I don't have that contingency airfield in the back pocket. Details. Well, no problem. I can go to Edwards Air Force Base, and it's real close. It's just right down there. I can see it. Well, they close their airfield while I'm up there. I'm going, you guys aren't giving me all the information here. So, and I'd been listening to them across the mountains at Lemoore doing FCLPs. There's Hornets over there. I know how to get back over there. I'm going over here to Ridgecrest, California. If any of you guys have ever been to that little place. Oh, yeah. Inyokern. No, I'm going over to Inyokern Airport. That's where I learned about those, what are the pilot-controlled lights and, landing down there. Bam, in the dark, coyote running across the runway, and park a jet there and call maintenance and go, hey, can you come get me? I just parked your jet about 7 miles away. And,
wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
As far as you say, the guys coming out and looking at this 737 and taking pictures, those guys loved it. That's probably the most jet fuel they'd sold in a month, man. They filled up a Hornet.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, and I look at the flight schedule for the next day, and I give the guy a call. I go, by the way, your jet's over in Inyokern. You got to go over there and get it. What? Yeah. You go over there and grab it. Yeah. So, you adapt. But,
yeah. And that's really the key is, you train. You can follow SOPs all you want, but the reality of the situation, that life is that gray area of what we're talking about, like alpha, gamma rays and alpha rays and all that other shit that's in the middle
Alpha particles, gamma rays.
Alpha particles, gamma. Yeah, we were talking. We were running and talking about all kinds of shit, man. I'm like,
Wow.
oh,
You guys had a long flight.
well, it was a long run this morning. Here we are on Hawaii time, and I mean 5 a.m. It's still dark out, and it's time to get up. It's like 8 a.m. No, it's 5 a.m. I'm like, oh. So yeah, we ended up meeting up with our other captain, the one that's flying us back today, and the three of us. You're allowed to leave the hotel under this Honolulu or Hawaii crew member quarantine. You're allowed to leave the hotel to go get food and return back to eat it or drink it. Yeah, you got liquid nourishment. Yeah. Or you can go out to do your physical exercise as long as you maintain social distancing protocols. So, last night we got in and it was not too late, but hungry. So we went out and found a place to eat. Happened to be on the other side of Waikiki. Got some good Thai food that we were able to get and bring back. And then, of course, the ABC stores are all open. So, a couple adult beverages. And then this morning, we said, hey, I'm going to go for a run in the morning if you want to join me. And Chris was like, well, yeah, I'll join you.
Slow you down.
Not at all.
Don't feel bad about leaving me.
I got about 10, 15 pounds of isolation weight I need to get rid of, so I've slowed down a couple minutes per mile easy. So actually,
you are human then, aren't you, Tony?
It was perfect. It was perfect. So we get to running, and he's telling me about how he was here in the military and how he used to have an apartment close by for a period of time. What was it?
Oh, I don't know. I never had any apartments. No. I mean, for 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, you stayed at the, I don't know, the Outrigger Reef, or you stayed at the Hilton Hawaiian Village, or wherever out here when they got the big exercises. They don't have enough place out Pearl Harbor or Hickam for you, so you're out in town.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
I mean, he's giving me all kinds of history and his time served, and then now here at Legacy Airlines, all his time here, and what a wonderful history. And hopefully he's be willing to share that with us someday and do a show about the journey of this particular aviator over here.
I'm sure to be a good one.
Just Forrest Gump my way along.
That's it.
All there is, man.
That's it. So, we had some conversations about the current political crisis, the current
there is one?
It's what? The political or crisis? I don't.
Both.
Yeah. Oh, and then we talked about what's going on with COVID and this lockdown and when is it going to let up, and there's only 2 crews here at the hotel.
Wow.
And they're both Legacy Airline crews. The entire hotel is shut down. The restaurant is limited. You can go pick up food. They have a very limited menu, but every other amenity in this entire 17 floor hotel is closed, shut down. There's maybe 10 employees here total for us.
Wow, that's horrible, man.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean,
you don't really have to wait for the elevator.
No.
There's a plus.
Yeah. So, when we came in, this is an interesting fact. So we touched down here in Honolulu, cleared the runway, went right to the gate, very minimal traffic. A lot of Hawaiian Airlines aircraft parked nose to butts on the runway.
Wow.
Which was weird to see. And then as soon as we got off the airplane, we secured the aircraft, walked up the jet bridge, and 2 members of the National Guard were there at the jet bridge, and they had the thermal, laser thermometers, whatever they're using, to check your temperature. If your temperature was over 100.4, then the entire crew was then going to be brought to another location for additional screening. So none of us, including our deadheaders, had a temperature over 100.4. So then we proceeded. We had to fill out a form. It's a brand new form. It's a COVID declaration form that you have to say that you haven't had any of these symptoms in the last 14 days or haven't been, knowingly exposed to anyone who had it. Sign your name away, and then you hand that in to another officer who checks you off on the list, and they hand you the rules. The governor's decree of what you can and cannot do by law, because all other passengers are under a 14-day self-quarantine where they go home as long as they don't have the temperature. But we're flight crew. We go out tomorrow. So we have a limited flight crew or essential worker quarantine. And as we mentioned, the only two things we can do is go get food or go get exercise. I thought, well, hey, I'll get exercise. I'll go for a run, maybe go for a swim. No. The swim, the beaches are off limits. Flight crew cannot participate in any nautical activities. So for anyone that wants to go for a swim and then just for exercise, you can't do it. The pool here at the hotel is closed, not necessarily due to COVID, but it's because, well, the hotel's closed, might as well remodel the pool. So they have been working out there with jackhammers and sanding devices and retiling the entire very nice pool deck. So they're taking the time to kind of revamp the hotel. I'm sure this is going to look really nice when it's all said and done. The staff here, Chris was asking the bellman at the front desk there, when they think this is going to be lifted, and nobody knows. It's an indefinite quarantine until something better comes along that they can start lifting these restrictions. If you get caught hanging out on the beach and they say, well, where do you live? And are you under quarantine? And okay, so you get caught, up to 1 year and up to $5,000 in fine and 1 year imprisonment. So they're not joking around about this crew member quarantine here. So we got to be cautious. So we kind of stick together. We have letters from our company that they've had us print out and keep in our back pocket when we're out on these layovers and trying to get food. The company and the union rep, they always say, stay at the hotel as much as you can, stay isolated, do your part, keep everyone safe, wear your mask, all this good stuff. But since you do have to leave the hotel, especially when they're shuttered like this and there's not a good place to eat, here is a form that says that you are an essential worker by the U.S. government, and carry that with you in case you have a problem, in case you have a law enforcement officer start to ask you some questions. So, yeah, so far it's been so good.
All right, take care, guys. Sorry to bail out a little early.
No worries, man. Go be with your family and give them all our best. Thank you for...
I will do that.
Take care, buddy.
Yep, thanks. And I'll catch you guys next time. It's nice to meet you, Chris.
All right, nice to meet you. See ya.
All right, enjoy your flight back tonight.
All right.
All right. Have a good one, Rod.
See you guys.
Now that's what you got to do. So he's saying that you can only exercise, you can only eat. They throw you in jail.
Yep.
Where do you live? Well, that's when you start doing that. You just slurring and looking incoherent. You just point over there that I live over there. I'm a homeless person, and I just live over here in the corner, so they're not going to mess with you. You just go lay down, and
That's it.
off they go.
I claim this as mine.
This is where I live, man, and off they go. Leave you alone.
All you have to do is go to that corner and go,
Yeah.
mine.
And they'll walk away. You win.
It's like the
spreading
Volkswagen
the virus
commercial, right?
one licking of the handrail at a time. Disgusting. Oh man. Well,
Anyway,
thank you for sharing
that boy,
your
right.
your experience with us there, Rob, because I have some good news. A character that's floating around social media now for a few years that has become extremely popular with flight crews, pilots, and flight attendants alike is a young man who is really making a name for himself as a puppeteer. We've seen the character floating around the internet, and I found him almost 2 years ago now. When one of his videos on YouTube went viral, made Facebook, made Instagram, and all these other platforms. And that's the wonderful puppet we love named Captain Roger Victor. Now, Captain Roger Victor is relatively popular. There are other videos out there that we we love to share amongst the aviation industry. There's living the dream. You've seen this Lego movie style
It's my favorite.
animated Legos, and whoever has created that over the past few years, it has blown
He's a
up.
genius.
I think they're up to 4 different episodes now, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
That's where the term work contracts, work scheduling,
work management.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
So
funny.
if you haven't Googled Living the Dream, part 1, 2, 3, and 4, I highly recommend it. But back to Captain Roger Victor. So I reached out to Captain Roger Victor, or at least his handler, Bozo, in the past. And we've been talking back and forth, but unfortunately our schedules have really not matched up. And as a matter of fact, the last time we text back and forth, he indicated that he's got a pretty busy plate. And that is evident when you look at the AOPA magazine from last month and you look at his full page spread. They also did a little video with Captain Roger on the AOPA headquarters where he was interviewed about his journey in aviation. They asked him a few questions, and I'll put a link in the show notes for the AOPA interview link. So check it out. And to get to the show notes, whatever podcast player you're listening to Squawk Ident on, just scroll down, and at the bottom of each episode, there's show notes where I usually put as much detail about what we've talked about. Every reference about every news article that we mention is there, as well as the credits and the links to the websites and social media outlets. So check it out in the show notes, the Captain Roger Victor link. He also made his podcast debut on another podcast. Why? I know it didn't work out with us, but he did make it onto a podcast called Grounded with Flight Attendant Joe. And he told me about it. He said, "Hey, I just did a podcast. I'm sorry, but maybe next month we can get together," and I'm hoping that it works out. So I checked it out. And I got to tell you, I was impressed. Flight Attendant Joe, Grounded with Flight Attendant Joe, pretty good podcast. He interviews people in the industry, and he interviewed 2 parts. The first hour was with the puppet, Captain Roger Victor. He spoke about Speed Tape Airlines, the flight attendant and puppet that he has and how he got started. And man, that puppet is riveting. He had some really great insights on society. He had insights on the industry. And I'm like, damn, this puppet is dropping knowledge. This guy is great. And then the second part of the interview, he interviewed his handler, Bozo, as Captain Roger affectionately calls him. It's hard when you're a puppet and having a man's arm or hand up your ass all day long and you have no legs. It's very hard to fly an airplane that way, and Captain Roger Victor explains it all. His handler, Bozo, also explained, how he got started, how, when he was a kid or a teen in Israel, and how he ended up with a Kermit the Frog puppet, and that really kind of sparked a passion for puppeteering. And again, some wonderful, riveting information and insights on his journey. And I just want to say thank you to Flight Attendant Joe for asking some of the funnier questions, because he had me rolling, and I was very impressed with Captain Roger Victor and Bozo's responses. So check that out. I'll put a link to that podcast at the bottom of the show notes there as well. You can also check out his Facebook page. That's at Facebook / Captain Roger Victor, or at speedtapeairlines.com. So check it out. Let us know what you think. If you can, as a listener, send out a word saying, "Hey man, you need to go on the Squawk Ident Podcast with these guys," I'd love to have them. Let's see if we can make that happen. For the show, that pretty much wraps it up. Reporting from Honolulu's Prince Waikiki Hotel has been a blast. This is a great hotel. I've recorded many a podcast here. The views are spectacular. As soon as we're done recording, I'm going to crank open these giant windows here that slide open about 7 feet wide and get the fresh air from the Pacific.
Nice.
Oh my God, it's spectacular. Rob, next time I do a Hawaii trip, and it's open in the back, open invite, man. Just non-rev with me. We can hang out, and unfortunately,
I need to do that
can't
because
go.
I've been doing too many like Minneapolis. No offense, Minneapolis, but your city isn't fun anymore. And
Yeah.
Chicago at the Hilton
Yeah,
Airport.
at the airport
No,
Hilton. I've done
that's
those
not
too.
fun anymore either.
Yeah.
All these airports are. I mean, all these hotels are, like you explained, are just, there's nothing to do and it's boring. Thank God the overnights I've had have been short. Basically 10 and a half, 11 hours. You're there, you just shut your eyes, you wake up, and it's time to go back to work. So
Yeah.
I'll have to make my way out to Hawaii one day.
For sure, we'll go for a run together or something. Well, pretty soon, coming up, and I know it's not going to happen immediately because California is under this, secondary restriction now, and they're kind of starting to lock things up again. But as soon as this COVID thing is over, Rob and I were discussing having our very first meetup. That's a Squawk Ident meetup where fans or listeners of the show can come together. We can have a live broadcast, and we want to do that from a very special location in Santa Barbara, California, the Hollister Brewing Company.
A Hollister Brewing Company.
Yeah.
Yep. They have a really nice patio outside so you can socially distance from each other while still enjoying the company and, taking some of that Pacific air, the Pacific breeze, and enjoy a really good microbrewed beer from my buddy's restaurant called the Hollister
Are they
Brewing
still
Company.
doing the outdoor seating is okay over there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's really pushing it hard now because that's one of the, the few things where he can actually, that's one thing he has over a lot of the other restaurants or microbreweries in the area is that he has a really nice patio area out there, a large patio area. So he can fit quite a few people out there and still provide a good service and, some good beer and food. So he's doing pretty good.
So pretty soon, let's get together and get that going here.
Absolutely.
And Chris, do you have any last words you'd like to send out to the podcast world?
No, they don't want to hear anything that I got to say.
On the contrary, my friend.
Yeah.
Man, it's anything you say is interesting, man. If people haven't heard it, I'm sure they'll want to hear it because it's good stuff.
Well, see, I don't know how to get it up on the screen there and show it, but I'll show him. We'll just talk. You guys were talking about simulators, flying Rob was, and getting all the training. Remember the Malaysian flight, that 777 that disappeared, and they were showing the little setup that the captain had. He built himself a simulator in there, and he's like, "Oh my god."
He was really into it.
This is a 777 simulator that Johnny in the flight office built in a spare bedroom in his house.
Wow. So for those that don't know, here at Legacy Airlines, we recently had retire someone in our flight office in Los Angeles. He is a musician, really a savant. I mean, he remembered everything. Well, he's showing me a video of, and this is a 777 cockpit he recreated. We're talking switches and lights and oh my god, it's like
I could only imagine people are really into that stuff.
It's like a class 2 sim.
They really make a real kind of like level C flight simulator in their house, pretty much. No motion. Oh yeah, that's amazing. Yep.
That's the video display that it has.
Yeah. Look at that.
That is amazing.
Yeah, that is really passionate right there about flying. That is so cool.
So then I asked, Johnny, where did you get all the parts?
Yeah, good
question.
It
was you have to remember I used to work in supply and I am from Long Beach. I'm not going to ask anymore.
And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That is cool. That's absolutely cool.
There's a real business for that kind of stuff. I mean, there's
could charge
people
admission.
that fly virtual airlines, and they build that stuff in their basement or whatever in their bedroom. Yeah. And they have like a virtual reality airline across the world. I mean, they have scheduled flights and they do everything we do with like real-time weather. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool little world they got going.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up episode 51. Thank you for joining us here on Squawk Ident. I want to say thank you to all of the frontline workers out there, the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, EMTs, medical techs, firefighters, law enforcement, grocery store employees, truck drivers, Amazon workers, and of course, all of the airline employees that show up to work every single day to provide the essential services that they do. Are you enjoying Squawk Ident? I truly hope so, as do we all. Please review the show on your favorite podcast player, share it with a friend, and, we love reviews, so listener feedback and reviews are great. Send us DMs on the social media anytime, and I do my best to respond to every single one of those. You can also send us audio feedback and comments via the website. That's at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. And just last week, I just registered a new domain. That's the squawkidentpodcast.com. That's squawkidentpodcast.com. If you go there, it's just going to redirect you right to aviatortony.com. But we're getting bigger. Things are happening. This is great. There you can check out episode cover art. You can check out the pilot shop, photos from the flight line. You can also find the audio archive from past shows and the guest book photo tab, or the photo page, where we post pictures of our guests, interviews from the show, and a little visual medium for a compliment to their journeys and the stories that they've given us over the past episodes. You can also contribute to the show and help us by becoming a producer of the Squawk Ident Podcast, either with a one-time or recurring contribution right there on the home screen. Facebook and Instagram users can search Squawk Ident Podcast, and YouTube and Twitter users can search Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident to follow on the socials. If you're listening on an Apple podcast player or Spotify app, we would really appreciate some kind words. Leave us a review. Anything is fine, critical or otherwise. You make sure you subscribe to Squawk Ident, and then you can leave us a review and then click on the library on the bottom of your screen, at least on the Apple Podcast player, and then click on shows and click on Squawk Ident, and that's where you can write a review right there. There's a link. One final thank you to my Squawk Ident crew, to Captain Roger, to Rob D, and to Captain Chris joining us today on this wonderful mobile recording of the Squawk Ident Podcast. And as always, thank you for taking the time to listen to this grateful aviator. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other.